We hope you enjoyed this video on handling and responding to difficult conversations. Please do leave your comments in the section below, and don't forget to subscribe so that you're notified when new content becomes available. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Carla Smith. She is the Business Manager for Commissioning Support at NHS Arden and Greater East Midlands Commissioning Support Unit. Hello, Carla.
But thank you to SBK for allowing me the opportunity today to share my thoughts. What I wanted to firstly say is my name is obviously Carla, and I work for the OD Consultancy, which is part of a commissioning support unit. We find ourselves in a very challenging situation, and for us it is a great challenge, but it's not the first challenge. We've obviously had things like Brexit, if we remember Brexit, that's not happened too long ago. And of course, as a business unit for NHS England, we're always finding ourselves challenging with restructures or merging the sustainability transformation programs and now integrated care systems. So COVID-19 has offered a different way of working, but of course we've always been in the forefront of those difficult conversations. So my background is NHS. It was one of my first job when leaving university. So I've been working for just over 15 years now in the NHS, and I started working within the laboratory. The laboratory was with scientists, and it was to do with immune systems, DNA, genetics. And in essence, it was their role with my support to make sure that patients were suitable to have live transplants. So I've always been interested in people, and I've always been interested in the science behind things. More recently, and now for the last 3 or 4 years working in the business unit, it's given me a real great opportunity to sort of work with well-being and the strategic areas that we need to work on, and of course the challenges. So hopefully you can see my next screen. I'm not able to see it, so I'm hoping you can. Lovely. Okay, I think there's a slight delay, but at least we can see the screen. Okay, so this is our screen that we put together, and we are happy for any NHS organisation to use. So as a commissioning support unit, we are commissioned or asked to do some work for an NHS organisation who might not have the capability or the time to do pieces of work that are coming up and quite urgent. So we put this together as a COVID-19 response to virtual working. And as I've alluded to, we work with various customers, we call them CCGs or NHS organisations, just to help them get into this virtual mindset. Now, appreciative today is about difficult conversations. So where does difficult conversations lead us and or look like within this model? Now, for me, difficult conversations is about 2 people or more. So it's really about your well-being, but it's also about their well-being too. So there needs to be an understanding of you, your skills, your strengths, your weaknesses, and your challenges, but also about the person who you're going to hold the conversation with. And keep in mind that I know we're in COVID-19, but difficult conversations have been around for a long time. For example, if somebody hasn't or isn't going to meet their performance targets, they know they're going to have a conversation at some point. So the worry and the anxiety is on both sides. Okay. So as you've signed up for, these are your learning objectives today, and I will do my best to at least guide you to some tools and resources where you can do some more homework later. There's plenty of resources out there, and what I will say to you is any resource that I offer you today is free of charge. That's not me selling this to you. It's out there, it's with reputable organisations. I've been having conversations with the armed forces, people who cope with cancer, the Samaritans, Age UK. So these are colleagues of ours who have been having difficult conversations for a long time. So let's move on to recognising trauma. I think most of us have probably got an idea of what trauma is in theory, okay? But actually the definition of trauma in the dictionary is that it's a longer term or an overwhelming amount of stress that we will face. So it's not about the stress, it's about the accumulation of stress on stress on stress, and obviously that is becoming over time. So I guess what we're saying here is that we need to deal with the little stresses so they don't become a trauma. Okay, so this is why the first box here says experience the effects of overwhelming stress. Now, I know you're going to ask me about the model in front shortly, and I will come to that. But I just want to allude to the fact that COVID-19 is bringing a lot of stresses to a lot of people, a lot of anxieties, a lot of worries, whether you're front-facing in the organisation, in a hospital, whether you're a GP having to give bad news, whether you've been asked to work from home and you're feeling guilty. There's a lot of difficult conversations. There's a lot of guilt out there. There's a lot of resentment too, and that is sad to see and to hear, but it is happening. Now, you know, there's a fear of loss. A lot of people will have lost somebody already. There's a fear of maybe losing finances within your household because somebody's being furloughed. We've all got a situation that we're finding ourselves in, which is a worry, which does lead to the anxiety, which leads to the stress if not managed. Now, the trauma itself is the perception of the threat. So think about why you're worrying. Put yourself into a situation where when you were at school, at college, university, you were going for an exam. Remember that nervous feeling, that anxiety, the butterflies in the stomach. Have a think about what was it you were fearing at that time. For me, it would have been not passing the exam. It would have been not getting the career I wanted to. The conversation you might be having with your family member or child about not being able to give them pocket money this week because, you know, mummy or daddy has been furloughed or they've been laid off, there's no job available for them. The fear of your child reaction is the worry. So keep in perspective that we do live with stress on a daily basis. We do have anxiety. We do have worry. They don't always need to be negative, but actually it's the threat of what other people are going to react to or how you're going to react that causes the trauma. So let me explain the picture. One of my colleagues from the science world gave me this picture, and I thought it was fantastic. So this is why I wanted to share it with you. The cross is your chromosome within your body. Now you'll see towards the end of the crosses, there are caps. Now these are called telomeres. And these are the caps that protect your chromosomes. So they protect your genes. They're protecting your sort of DNA. Now, when we get stressed, those caps start to break down. You can see that they look a little bit like ash. They're starting to burn away. The more stress we put on our body, i.e. our chromosomes or our cells, the more that those caps are going to disintegrate. This then opens the barrier. It opens the gates to that chromosome becoming stressed itself. This is where we start to see things like aging processes and cancers. Now, we live in a world where we are never going to be free from stress or anxiety or worry. So the green cross really is our ideal. Okay, we need to be living on the top of a mountain with mindfulness every day and with no job, no money worries to be in this state. It's not a reality, but it is the green starting point. Most of us are more likely to be where the yellow cross or the amber cross is. We have some stresses and we can deal with them. To give you an idea, the red cross is often seen, more likely seen in cancer patients. So cancer patients go through a humongous amount of stress on their bodies through various treatments, chemotherapy, radiotherapy, and they're probably also going through some other emotions as well. So remember the well-being slide that I showed at the beginning. I'll just go back a couple of slides. So this well-being slide really highlights that actually your physical well-being, for example, if you were suffering with cancer, would be one segment of your well-being in its holistic approach. You may also be having financial worries. You may also be having emotional or psychological worries about leaving family behind. So the point I'm making here is that we cannot eradicate stress, but we can deal with it. But let's not get to that point where it becomes a trauma and we really are doing damage to our bodies. So I'll give you a couple of examples that are live on the website for NHS at the moment. And this is staff asking us about mental health and about stress and what they can do. There's a Black member of staff who has struggled before COVID-19 with discrimination due to skin colour. They're now finding themselves on a ward as a nurse, and they've got another stress now because they're having to deal with patients on a daily basis who may not recover from the virus. So that person has already got a discrimination stress that they are dealing with, and now they are dealing with the stress due to COVID-19 situation. And this is a reality. This is a real life story. Another example is a staff member needed to shield. They needed to shield themselves away from home, in the home place, because they've got an underlying condition. So they're already dealing with their underlying condition of, okay, this is whatever the underlying condition was, let's say diabetes or transplant, as my world in the science world started. On top of that, they're now also feeling guilty because they're not with their colleagues on the front line. They're feeling guilty that they can't help, so they're stressing, they're worrying. Now, stress upon stress, as we know, is coming to trauma. This is what we want to eradicate. A good thing I heard not so long ago on a call was that one of the best things you can do to help during the COVID-19 crisis is to stay at home. So it really brings me to ask the question, why are people worrying and anxious about staying from home? What is their fear? They're obviously fearing something about when they go back into the workplace. And this is something that we are working with NHS on. What will that conversation look like when they do go back into the workplace, when everybody's talking about the front line and how easy it was possibly to be working from home. And it isn't the case. So another example that I can offer that we read about and trying to work through was that staff members having relationship problems. So one element of stress, they're trying to deal with that. They then been asked to be redeployed. So they're going to another place of work that they wouldn't normally go to, changing their routine. It's upset them. They then go home and find out that their partner has been furloughed with possible redundancy. So you can imagine we've got this emotional relationship stress going on. Then we've got the stress of a career change, or at least a short-term secondment change. And then we've now got this financial change and stress to deal with. It's a lot to deal with. We are human. We can deal with stress, but it's practically impossible to deal stress on stress on stress. That person is eventually going to burn out and will show signs of not only stress, but also of trauma. Okay, so what I want to do really is just offer you a little bit of background of what some of the signs and symptoms of stress look like. Now, I'm sure most people will know what this looks like. The one for me here that we don't see now would be the presenteeism. This is about us working from 7 till 7, particularly those that are working from home. Okay. What we will see in the frontliners are probably more emotional because, you know, they will start to lose motivation. They will start to lack a little bit of confidence. There will be, into the psychological element, a whole lot of negative thinking going on. You know, what if this, what if that? What if I'm taking the virus home to my family? You will see some behavioural changes. Now, the key point here is that when we talk about PTSD, so the post-traumatic stress disorder, and just to note, this is a disability. This has been recognised as a disability. But PTSD is built up because of that stress on stress on stress, that it's got to that traumatic stage that our body now is struggling. and this is what we call PTSD. And it will only take the smallest of triggers to break us down, to completely just floor us. So we're at that real danger state when we get to PTSD. Okay. Now, if you'd like support with things like risk assessment training in terms of, or stress awareness testing, then that can be done in your workplace. It's general stress awareness, but it's about the most difficult part of stress awareness training is asking people to talk and identify that they are stressed or may be showing symptoms. For humans, it tends to be a little bit of a weakness. So the difficult conversations here may be, do you have these symptoms? Do you have these signs? But the difficulty is about getting that person to open up. So later, in a few moments, we'll look at some skills to help people to open up. But I thought this slide is really useful. And again, if there's any support that you feel that we can help with, then please do use the chat box or email. And your organisation should have this in place. And if not, we can at least help. So just to give you an idea, people who suffer with cancer and the Macmillan nurses who do a fantastic job of looking after people with cancer have a blog. So I had a conversation with them and they've allowed me just to share a couple of quotes from their blog. So you'll see the link at the bottom of the slide. By all means, go in and have a look at what people are asking or thinking about difficult conversations, but also about the responses that these professionals respond to. So I'll read this out as they said to me. There are many reasons for avoiding a difficult conversation. The most common is that people don't feel ready or they don't know how to get started. Now, the good thing is that you're here today to understand about difficult conversations. So that in essence to me is your readiness. You're ready to understand this. How to get started, I will offer a few tips and tools later. The second quote, talking sooner has the advantage of allowing everyone involved to explore different ideas without feeling pressure to make a decision. The point here is you do need to have the conversation. Have that conversation sooner rather than later. Allow that person who you're going to be talking to, or allow yourself to explore what options would be available. Now, I guess again, the key point here is when you're talking about a difficult conversation, think about also having the difficult conversation with yourself. This isn't just about two people. This might be about understanding where you are in terms of your own well-being, which will identify your own strengths and your own weaknesses, and about you opening up to be true to yourself. Now, the next slide is more video, and it's Age UK. And again, Age UK are experts at having those difficult conversations with those that are near to dying or at dying point. So I'm just going to try and share and load this video. Just give me 1 second.
Okay. Talking about dying can be very difficult. It makes people feel uncomfortable. It seems easier to ignore. But it's important to talk, to ask questions, to listen, and to know what our loved ones would like when death comes. Talking about dying before you need to can help you and the people around you to be able to accept and talk naturally about fears and wishes. It gives everyone the chance to share their worries. When we talk, we have the chance to make informed choices together. Everyone will know what you want around food, drink, dignity and pain relief, and what physical changes to expect and why these might happen. Children are very much a part of loss, but they are often overlooked. Some adults think they are protecting children from grown-up worries. Grandparents often have special relationship with their grandchildren. But some parents discourage any discussions about death and loss. But the truth is usually less scary than a child's imagination. From speaking to older people, we know that they find it easier to speak to their peers about death and dying than with their younger friends and relatives. We've heard from people who have experienced a death that they wish they had been more prepared, particularly what to expect around physical changes, what to ask doctors and nurses, and how to raise concerns and ask questions about their care. People worry about starting conversations that might upset or offend. Often we may be frightened about what we may hear and how we will react. We might feel awkward about mentioning losing dignity, toilet issues and washing. Sometimes if a friend or relative have died, it makes us all think about our own lives and futures. It could be because of a terminal diagnosis or a change to a general health issue. This will sometimes make us wonder, how will everyone cope without me? How will I cope without them? What about my pet, my grandchild? How can I talk about my guilt or shame about something that's happened in the past? Why can't my daughter accept that I am dying? How can I tell my family I want to stop treatment? If you are thinking about these issues, it's very probable that others are too. We all have concerns about being brave and pretending it's okay when it's not. We often worry about how others will feel. We all have worries about not doing the right thing, not knowing what to expect, or understanding the care, or being able to speak out. All of these feelings are very normal and good to share. Talking in the normal way will almost always work. Remember, humour has an important place even in death. There are no right or wrong ways to talk. It will be different for us all. Leading questions can help conversations to develop. Some people will die at home, some in hospitals and hospices. Doctors and nurses are there to help and will support dignity and keep the dying person comfortable and pain-free, and reassure relatives and friends. There may be times when staff do not explain the care plan or the physical changes to be expected in a way that relatives and friends can understand. This is an important issue, as sometimes these anxieties may make friends and relatives appear rude and difficult, and staff may be perceived as uncaring and matter of fact. Having easy to understand conversations will make sure everyone knows what is going to happen and why. Sometimes as people come to the end of their life, they may be unresponsive. The sound of the noisy breathing is like snoring. It doesn't tend to disturb the person, but more those around them. They will still be able to hear and will find comfort in your voice and touch. Hold their hand and say whatever you need to. Tears are okay, they don't need to be hidden. They're part of the goodbye. The expected death of a loved one is not an emergency. Nothing needs to be done in a hurry. Take some time. Give everyone the opportunity to do what's right for them. Remember, we will all have our own way of grieving. Try not to judge.
So I hope that was useful. Please let me know if you can't hear me, but that was an emotional video for me when I started to do a little bit of research into how other organisations have difficult conversations, and of course Age UK have a fantastic amount of resources that you can utilise as an individual or as a team just by visiting their website. So the next organisation that I've done a little bit of research and had a few discussions with from some of the topics that you sent through to SBK before this webinar is the Armed Forces. NHS England and a lot of the NHS employers now are working with the armed forces. I mean, let's face it, some of the armed forces, they understand what trauma is, they understand the risks, they understand stress. They've been to world wars and they've come back. Okay, they're fighters, and most of the time their veterans recover. Okay, so they really do understand what trauma and PTSD is all about. Now, how they reduce the risk of trauma So this is starting to look at our second objective about how we can reduce that stress and trauma within the workplace or within your individual life. They use a model called TRIM, and you may start to hear a little bit more about this within your own organisations, particularly if it's NHS. TRIM is around your trauma management. Okay. Now, how they do this is by risk assessment. So this is another key thing to perhaps go back to the organisation and ask about, do they offer risk assessment training? We normally think about risk assessments of tripping over wires, or is there too many plug sockets, or we're not allowed fans on, or radiators. But actually there is a stress risk assessment. Now, if you don't have a copy of this within your organisation, I would strongly encourage you to go to the website for IOSH, which is your International Organisation for Safety and Health. They have a staff stress risk assessment that you can download and you can adapt. There's also online tools that you can do to assess your risk yourself, or your stress yourself, but please be advised, you just have to take that as it is. For confidence in a website and an organisation, IOSH is an international standard. Okay, so their approach really is about watching or keeping an eye on the individual. That's the way they manage their trauma. So keep in mind, this is trauma. So this is about stress on stress, but we don't want to let it get to PTSD status. So the watchful eye usually is done by a peer. So it might be worth considering introducing some sort of peer support to help candidates who have already identified that they are at this traumatic stage, or a peer support so they don't get to this traumatic stage. I know a lot of organisations already have in place co-workers or buddy workers so that people can just talk throughout each of the day. And one of the key things that they ask of that model is, when you leave work, please ask your buddy, how are you feeling? What went really, really horrible today? What can we do right now so that you go home in a more positive mindset? I say some organisations already have this in place. It's fantastic. If not, it's a considerable just to think about for the future. So TRIM itself is threefold. The first thing would be about holding a briefing. So if we're going to learn anything from the forces, this is something we can take away today. Hold a briefing. Have a group of people in the same room or in the same webinar, because obviously we're virtual at the moment, and just explain, why have we done this? How are people feeling about this? And what should we have done differently? What lessons can we learn from this particular day? Let's start at a very sort of minute point a day. That way people are talking. We're learning lessons all the time about how we could have made or improvements or done this better. The armed forces tend to do this as a group, and let's face it, it's usually a group of heroes that are going to the front line. They will all come back, most will come back, and so they'll have this briefing. The second point, or the second, I guess, block to this TRIM model is about leaflets and other resources. So we often see pamphlets for how to deal with stress, who you can go to if you are stressed, how to cope with a dying colleague or a dying family member, and who to go to. There's companies out there such as Boots, Age UK, Samaritans, etc. The leaflets are endless. But what they do is they make them into a format where it's just easy to guide and support that team or that individual. So for us as an NHS organisation, we would always say, firstly, go to your own counsellor, your engagement assistance programme. If they don't have the support, go to your wellbeing lead. If they don't have the support in place, the national support from NHS is fantastic and has all the support that you may need. About it, it's being virtual at the moment. Okay, so that's what it would be about. And then the final stage of their TRIM model is the actual risk assessment. So we spoke a little bit about that in terms of, you can obtain a stress risk assessment just for staff should you wish, but I'm sure pretty much most people will understand how a risk assessment works. If not, again, myself, or you can perhaps ask SBK to do a webinar on how to do a risk assessment. Now, the risk assessment really would be, the usual process would be to hold in a private, confidential and safe environment. It's difficult to replicate the workplace sometimes, but there are things we can do virtually to replicate a safe environment. We have things like common rooms or safe space rooms. Again, all of this information is on the NHS Employers website. All of the links to everything I'm talking to you about today to help is on the last page, so you will receive those. But as long as it's a safe room, it's a safe environment to do a risk assessment, what you would normally find is that it's confidential, it is about the listening, it's very much about the listening skills, and I'll offer you a tool for listening skills shortly from the Samaritans, but it's an agreement between you and that person. And because you both sign the risk assessment, you've both taken ownership of what you might need to do as an employer to perhaps make an adjustment, but even as an individual, what adjustments do you need? So following a trauma, it may be that I just can't go to that ward, not just for a week. I just need to get over this. It may be that, you know, I just need a day off because I need to get my mind in a better mindset before I go back and deal with patients. Okay, so we all get the idea of what we really want. It's about that conversation that we need to let ourselves have, but also it's about understanding the conversation through listening skills. So just to give you some confidence about the TRIM model, it is supported by NICE, which is your National Institute for the Healthcare Excellence. So it's very much a recognised model within the NHS already. I guess it might be something you could adopt, or you're thinking you might adopt to use in your own organisation. Okay, just another tool. So another thing that we've learned from the armed forces is called the STRAW model, which is about sustaining the resilience at work. So resilience is about how we deal with stress. If it's one stress, we're quite resilient. When it comes on stress, we become less resilient. And of course, this is not just about our mind, but it's also about our body. So I just want to offer you a very short video from Professor Neil Greenberg, who is at the forefront of our mental health strategy for the NHS. He is our expert in trauma and PTSD. So I'm just going to attempt to show you that. Please let me know if you can.
Hello, my name is Neil Greenberg. I'm a consultant psychiatrist, and I'm currently spending some time at the London Nightingale Hospital, advising on their mental health strategy. I work at King's College London, and I'm also advising and helping NHS England and Public Health England in relation to the current crisis. So I just want to give you a few tips from my view, particularly from my academic work, about how managers in healthcare services can take care of their staff. Now, in broad terms, we should think about how you prepare staff, how you support staff whilst they're doing challenging work, and then how you go about recovering staff back to whatever the new normal is going to be afterwards. Now, I think in terms of preparing staff, we want to make sure that they're properly informed about the sort of work that they might have to do. And that includes talking to them really honestly about the morally challenging aspects of dealing with COVID-19 patients. Those sort of discussions should not be sugar-coated, and people should be allowed to make an informed choice about whether they're able to do the work. They should also be prepared to support each other, and that should mean that they're aware that they should buddy up when they're on shifts, and that when they finish a shift, buddies should check in on each other to make sure that they're doing okay. Really importantly, we know that supervisors have a key role in protecting staff's mental health, and all of our research evidence shows that having a supervisor who can have a psychologically savvy conversation with a member of staff, who knows what to look for and who can be supportive, is really, really important in terms of protecting their mental health. So the main aim in any healthcare team doing challenging work is to try and support the team as much as possible to be able to be psychologically and trauma aware, and also to be really supportive. It's also a good idea to make sure that you have expert advice, mental health professionals around, but their role is to support the team and certainly not to come in and do psychological debriefing or to try and provide too early interventions when actually the answers to most people's problems are within the team and within the social support network of that team. However, mental health professionals can really help in terms of making sure that supervisors can have these psychologically savvy conversations and that they're supported in doing so. And also where someone can't be helped in the short term, then a good mental health professional taking very much a return to duty focus can help individuals either get back to work quickly, or if they do need evidence-based care, that it can help them to go and get it. Another important mechanism that's useful is peer support. So we know that peer support programs such as TRIM, Trauma Risk Management, can be really useful. These allow individuals to speak to trained colleagues in order to identify whether they've got difficulties, and if they have got difficulties, then they can be supported, often using practical problem-solving approaches rather than having to come to mental health professionals. I think the last thing to say, which is of great importance, is that once we begin to get into a new normal, whatever that is, it's really important that staff are actively monitored to check on their mental health, because we know that many people with mental health difficulties won't come and seek help. So that active monitoring may need to go on for some time. It shouldn't take the form of formal mental health screening, but using a case-finding approach where individuals can check on their own mental health anonymously to see how they're doing and can be given tailored advice about where to go to get additional support. That can be quite helpful. It's also, again, really important that supervisors talk to staff who are returning from these challenging duties to find out what their experiences were, and also to be able to reassure them that the organisation has got their back and that they very much want to nip things in the bud rather than let people deteriorate into having mental health difficulties. Overall, what we should be aiming for is a really supportive environment, both whilst they're doing the work and afterwards. We should be monitoring them, encouraging supervisors to be proactive and for colleagues to be supportive. And overall, what we're aiming for is for people to experience what's called post-traumatic growth rather than to develop illness. Thank you.
I hope that helped from one of our leading experts in the NHS, Professor Neil Greenberg. And I think he's reiterated that actually we can, we could probably get to a point where we don't need a difficult conversation, particularly if it's about stress. But actually, some of the tools I'll offer in a moment, we're not going to get away from a difficult conversation, such as people dying or somebody, saying to somebody you can't come and see a relative because of COVID-19. But the one thing I wanted to say, and I should have said a few moments ago, is when we chatted with Professor Neil Greenberg, he said he wanted to say a massive, massive thank you to all of the NHS workers, particularly who have gone on the front line and who are working at home to support the front line during the COVID-19 crisis. Okay, so we'll just do a very quick recap. Hopefully you're now recognising what trauma is and PTSD and what it can do to your body in terms of stress and the ageing process of those chromosomes. Reducing the risk of trauma through a risk management system such as TRIM or STRAW, but even if it's your local staff risk assessments, even if it's just that one-to-one conversation on a monthly basis, will really help reduce that trauma and stress. The conversations, as alluded to by Age UK, conversations need to happen. They need to happen sooner rather than later. So let's have go straight into sort of a learning objective today. This is a tool you can get from the NHS website, but this is something you can do as a self-help tool with yourself and your team. So those boxes offer the framework to help you with this conversation with teams, to help them have difficult conversations. It's been offered by Fallow and Harris, but again, all of the accreditations, etc., will be on the website. Safety really is a little bit about the place, not just the physical place, but the safety of your emotions. How are you at the moment in terms of your emotional safety? Should you be having the conversation? The trustworthiness is really about your relationship. So Professor Neil Greenberg alluded to this slightly with the trustworthy. It's about peer support. Do you feel that a nurse may be better to have a conversation with another nurse? Do you feel that if you've got a veteran working in your workforce, that somebody from the armed forces may be best suited? if you have somebody from the BAME community, maybe somebody from the BAME community would just make that conversation a little bit easier for that person. It's about that culture and the diversity. There's plenty of diversity groups out there. If you're struggling, please contact us. We'll forward the local details. Collaboration is just a reminder that the conversation is between two people, unless, of course, you're having a conversation with yourself. That's just one. But that is about understanding the respect for each other. Is it the right time for both of you to be having that conversation? You know, how are you both feeling? Look at the signs and the symptoms of the stress. The choice really is about, it's making your choice, and it's understanding the other person's behaviours. Are you or the other person becoming heated or becoming frustrated? Are you becoming angry? If so, it's your choice then to end that conversation on a positive note. We don't want to get into conflict resolution. So remember those choices that you have, and remember that you can say no. We'll go a little bit more on that bit later. Empowerment, it's okay to say no, but it's also okay to say, actually, I don't know the answer to this, but I know a person who can. So you need to be empowering people to have those conversations, but don't always feel that you have to be that person. As a line manager, we do find that they feel they are responsible for their colleague. They do feel that it's their responsibility to have the conversation. But really, don't assume anything at this point. It really is about listening to the person. And as a psychological first aider or a mental health first aider, even as a line manager, really is about the listening to what that person is saying. So on that note, this site from the Samaritans is fantastic. Now, they offer a whole series of learning plans. They give you all of the resources, all of the digital formats, all of the videos, and it's a great tool for you to use with your teams to try and open them up to the idea of a difficult conversation, or at least to be able to so that get that coherence. We can't do this today because the minimum time for one of these lessons is 20 minutes. But if we ask SBK kindly, they may do something on this in the future. If not, please contact us at the organisation, and I'm certainly sure we can support you with this. But just to give you a little bit of idea, what they do is they look at scenarios. It's about detective scenarios. It's also about mini sort of court scenarios. It's about getting people to open up and observe about how people are feeling and what body language to look for. It's about understanding barriers of why people would not want to have a conversation with that particular person. So I guess if you put yourself into a situation, we'll all have barriers of some sort as to why we wouldn't want to open up. These tools, these things, they go through all of that. I can't say how good these tools are. They're written and delivered by Samaritans, and we know how brave Samaritans are. They take these calls on a daily basis about conversations. Most of them are difficult, let's face it. When somebody calls Samaritans, they're at the end of the tether. But the website offers everything, including the listening techniques on how to use those. As a mediator, and I'm a trained mediator for some of the staffing workforce issues that we find in the NHS, we find that people fall into one of the three categories, usually within a conflict situation, but actually in any difficult situation, because it's about that barrier that people want to put up, that wall they put in front of them. So as a persecutor, these are the people that say it's all your fault, and I knew this was going to happen, and it's because you didn't do this. What we do as mediation is we turn that around. We turn that around so they take ownership that yes, they do have a little bit of power. They know they have that power, but actually, how can they use that power to let the other person know what they want? And it's about letting them know what they want at the beginning of the conversation, not when it ends, not when it's finished. Okay. We all know victims, the poor me. If it's going to happen to me, if anybody's going to get COVID-19, it's going to be me. If anybody's going to be laid off, it's going to be me. We all have those people. We all know those friends and colleagues. A mediator can turn that conversation around. What we do is we encourage that victim through various conversations to take ownership that yes, they may be vulnerable, but actually how can that vulnerability help them in a positive light? And that is about really them being upfront on saying what do they want. But again, it's about that conversation sooner. What do you want? Okay. The rescuer, now this is the danger that we find ourselves in with COVID-19 and difficult conversations. Line managers, particularly supervisors, they feel that they need to rescue their teams. They feel that it is them that need to have the difficult conversation. It's about people pleasing. People pleasing is a great skill to have, but you will burn out. Okay, so it is important to understand that you can say no at some point and therefore guide them or direct them to another resource. Okay, so this is the important thing here. What we would normally do also is reframe. So when we reframe questions. And again, there's certain traits that individuals follow. You'll see the diagram on the screen. But for example, if somebody's saying, I don't want you to talk to me like this. Who do you think you are? What do you know about this situation? That could cause conflict in a conversation. By reframing that conversation, we would offer some clarification back, and we would say, you sound concerned about why I'm here. You sound concerned that I might not have the experience to be able to support you through this. And what we do is we turn it around into a positive, whereby we're hoping they will say, yes, I am concerned. Do you have this qualification? What do you know about this? Have you been through this? And we would simply say, yes, we've been through this. We've had many conversations around this. But actually, if I can't help you with this, I can certainly send you, or I can send you some details to somebody who can. There's a whole load of networks out there. So it's just about thinking a little differently sometimes before you going into the rescue and say, let me help. You'll find various traits within personalities. Those that think a lot. Now, those that think a lot are not likely to be able to tell you confidently how they're feeling or what you want them to do. So it's about using this knowledge to reframe your questions to them. And if you find that there is somebody out there who is more sort of cognitive and they think about things all the time and they're thinking about worrying, ask them how they're feeling and ask them what do they want you to do about it. And that way you'll start to engage that conversation in a more positive note. The same as the emotional people. Okay, ask them, what do they think is going on? Get them to start thinking rather than feeling emotions. Ask them what they want you to do, getting them to think in a more practical approach. And lastly, for the practical people just want to do things. So they're not going to tell you all of the time how they're feeling. But again, reframe the question about how are you feeling about this? Okay, and what do you think is going to happen? Get them to start thinking in that thinking approach. So really what I wanted to allude to with all that was that sometimes you may be the best person for the conversation, but you need to understand, are you the right person for the conversation? They can be difficult. Now, as a line manager, you may feel that you wish to have the conversation, but take all the resources with you. Have an understanding of what your counselling service can already offer. Have a look at what Samaritans can already offer. Take your team on a journey about listening skills, okay, or look at and invest in mediation. It doesn't matter what you invest in or don't invest in. The point is there's resources out there and we want you to be looking after yourself when it comes to that conversation. I just wanted to offer you 5 C's in terms of just clarify what you want from the conversation. Be compassionate, be curious, which means listen, okay? Confirm back what the candidate might need and commit. And if you need a planner to help you with the conversation, go to the link on the last page, which is from the Leadership Academy, which offers you a complete plan to prepare for any conversation that you may have. And I will leave you there with my last screen to say thank you for listening to me today, and sorry I rambled on.